11 o'clock, so we'll get started. My name is Abel Montoya. I work at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and today we're going to talk about how to successfully navigate the financial aid process. I know paying for college can be scary for a lot of people. As a parent myself, I worry about, will we have enough money for my son when he goes to college? So my wife and I, we talk about how we're going to do this. And I imagine you have very similar questions. As a state agency, what we do is we try to make those plans after high school possible by providing information and assistance to make college affordable and accessible for all students. Now, the one thing that people don't realize, or actually, let me rephrase that. There is no one path for everybody, but everyone will have their own path. Okay. The question is, what is that path? Is it a 2-year program where you're going to get a vocational or trade program, or maybe a associate's degree? Is it going to be a bachelor's program? Is it a 4-year program? Are you going to community college, then transfer to 4-year school? Are you going to pursue a master's program? Are you going to go beyond that bachelor's degree? The reason why this is important is because this will help you kind of plan out what you need to do during that time so your son or daughter can get that credential, because it's not just about starting, it's also about persisting in getting that credential. It's all said and done. But remember, each person has their own path, and you as a family kind of need to sit together and have a discussion as to what works for all of you. Now, you're going to have lots of questions. Okay, can I afford college? How much is this going to cost me? What is financial aid? And that's something that people get all confused about. What is financial aid? Is it just really for those that have no money whatsoever? Or some people think I'm not going to get any money whatsoever because I make too much money. We're going to talk about how different people in different situations can qualify for different forms of aid, and we're going to also talk about the things to avoid, the mistakes to avoid, so it doesn't trip up the process, doesn't cause you any difficulty. We're going to talk about the Fafsa itself too. What is this form, the Fafsa that you hear all the time? Also be aware that now it's going to be a graduation requirement, or is a graduation requirement for all students in the state of Illinois in their senior year to complete the Fafsa, which is the free application for federal student aid, or the alternative application for Illinois financial aid, for those that don't qualify for the Fafsa. And this is to make sure that people are aware that there's money for college. And then you may have questions about how do I get this money? How do I apply? Where can I get help? Now, the one thing I want to reassure you is that to have questions is normal. It's expected. And the key thing is getting those questions answered. And that's why we're here to help you with this process, at least give you an introduction about what financial aid is. And if your school organization offers presentations on the financial aid process, go to them every time, because every time you pick up something new, okay? So what is financial aid? Well, financial aid is money that's either borrowed, given, or earned. And let me just step back for a moment and explain how the Department of Education approaches financial aid and how the colleges approach financial aid. Their perspective is that the student is responsible to pay for their own education, okay? Now, sometimes the student is not able to pay for their own education, so they need this financial aid assistance. So say, for example, the cost of attendance is this much. Hopefully you can see my hands. And say you can only afford this much. So there's a gap between what you can afford and what it costs. So financial aid hopefully fills that gap. And financial aid is money that's either borrowed, given, or earned by the students to bridge the gap between what it costs to attend and what the individual can actually afford. And that's why parents and families fill out these forms. And the key thing is making sure you fill out these forms correctly, because when you fill out these forms, you're going to be considered for different types of financial aid. There are two main types of financial. There's gift aid and there's self-help aid. With gift aid, that's exactly what it says, gifted. It's given. It does not have to be repaid. And it comes in two forms, grants and scholarships. Grants are typically based on financial need. So there's going to be some type of financial component or need-based component associated with that. With scholarships, it can be based on merit, it could be based on athletics, it could be based on community service, it could be based on the gender of the individual. Whatever the scholarship organization deems the criteria to be, that would be the criteria for scholarships. But in both cases, for grants and scholarships, that's going to be free money. Now, with self-help aid, you have to do something in exchange for that money. With loans, you got to pay them back. All right. And we'll talk about loans in more detail just a bit, because I know there's parents sometimes burden themselves with too many loans to help the kids pay for college. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then there's work study. Okay. And work study is a specific type of job that's offered on campus. For the FAFSA form, which is the free application for federal student aid, there's a question that says, do you wish to be considered for work study? I always tell families, say yes, okay? Because even if you say yes and you are offered work study, the student still actually has to go out and get a job, okay? And what happens is on campuses, they'll say only work study students can apply for the specific job, all right? So if someone wasn't offered work study, then the student cannot apply for that position, okay? And the reason being is that part of the salary is paid through federal funds, all right? So it's cheaper for college to hire work study students. If the student doesn't go out and get a job, well, that's no harm, no foul, right? But if at the Fafsa they say no or don't know to the work study question, they're not going to be offered that, okay? So that's one thing I tell families to do. Make sure you say yes to that question so you consider for that specific type of money. Now, where does all this money come from? There are four main sources, and I'll explain in a second why this is important. There's the federal government, which would be the Department of Education. There's the state government, which would be us, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. As a state agency, the General Assembly has empowered us to award need-based grants to students so they can go to college in the state of Illinois. Then there are the colleges themselves, and then there are private sources. The reason why it's important to understand that there are different sources is because each source has their own criteria for who is eligible to receive financial aid. For example, for the federal government, the student has to be a U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident, or a very specific visa type. Okay, so if the student is not a U.S. citizen, U.S. permanent resident, they don't qualify for federal aid. And by the way, I'm going to share this presentation as a PDF with the organizers, so you can have this for your reference later on. Okay, so just be mindful of that. We'll share this with you. Okay. And this is a lot of information. So if you don't pick up everything, it's okay. All right. So the federal government, the student has to be a U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident. The status of the parents does not matter. The status of the parents does not matter. It's all about the student. For the state government, if the student qualifies for federal money, the FAFSA form will use the same form. However, if the student is not a U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident, but they meet very specific criteria, if they're undocumented, have lived in Illinois for at least lived and gone to school in Illinois for at least 3 years in K through 12, and their parents reside in Illinois, and they attend a college in the state of Illinois, they could qualify for the need-based grant through the alternative application for Illinois financial aid. So the state government has slightly different criteria, and for the colleges, it's totally up to them. They decide to whom they wish to give the money. Typically, the kids that are admitted. Some colleges that are very expensive oftentimes give the most money. So don't let that initial cost of attendance dissuade you from applying to an institution. And then the private sources, well, it's totally up to them. And the reason why it's important to understand these sources is because each one of them will give you some money. For example, in this example, we have the MAP grant, which is the state grant. That's the monetary award program. That's from the state of Illinois. Currently, the maximum award is $5,340 for those that have the most financial need. Okay. And then we have the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant's from the Department of Education. That's for federal funds. And currently it's $6,345, and that's going to go up next year by another $150 or so. But currently, for this 2021 academic year, someone who qualifies for the MAP and for the Pell Grant can get over $11,600 in grants money, which is free money to go to college. So that will definitely help pay for college, or take at least a big chunk out of the cost of attendance. Now, this is somebody that's on one end of the spectrum that has maximum financial need. If someone doesn't have as much financial need, they may not get any of this free grant money, or they may just get a portion of it because they don't have as much need as someone who has maximum need. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind that each family is a little bit different. With the loans, there's a few things you need to consider, but I always explain to families with loans, only borrow what you need and no more. Do not take more than you need, because these loans will have to be paid back. They're not dischargeable in bankruptcy. Okay, so be very, very mindful of that. And by the way, if you do have questions, as mentioned earlier, just put them in the chat. I'll try to get to them during the presentation or at the end. I just want to make sure that we get through the whole presentation, because it's a lot of information to cover in 45 minutes. Now, back to the loans, there's 4 things to consider. What's the source of the loan? Is it subsidized or unsubsidized? What's the interest rate? And what are the repayment options? With the source of the loan, I don't work for the Department of Education, but I think they have the best types of loans because the interest rates are low, the interest rates are fixed. And if someone gets into difficulty paying those loans back, they can work with you to get some type of income-driven repayment program. So that's the Department of Education loans. If you try to get an alternative loan through another source, like a bank or credit union, be very, very careful of the details. Is the interest rate fixed or is it variable? Does it go up and down? What are the repayment options? Who do we need a co-signer? It's very different with alternative loans. With the interest rate, just like buying a house, the lower the interest rate, the better. The repayment options, we put that on there just to let you know that you have to pay these back. All right. Now with subsidized and unsubsidized loans, they're both loans, but with the subsidized loans, those are the loans that are need-based, which means there's a financial component, a financial need component from the student's perspective. And when that happens, when the loan is awarded to the student, the Department of Education pays the interest on the loan while the student is still enrolled in college. Once they drop below half-time, hopefully because they graduated, then the student is responsible for the interest and the principal of the loan. With the unsubsidized loans, they're not need-based, which means everyone will qualify them if they're eligible to fill out the Fafsa, okay? But that means that the student is responsible for the interest on that loan as soon as the loan is awarded, okay? So for the families to say, I'm not gonna get any financial aid, well, regardless of your income, if the student is a US citizen or permanent resident and they fill out the Fafsa, they're gonna qualify for direct unsubsidized loans. And as I mentioned earlier, the interest rates typically are lower and they're fixed, okay? So how do you apply for all of this? Well, you fill out an application, all right? Just like anything in life, you have to fill something out, right? So there are a few applications to be mindful of. The first is the FAFSA. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The key word is free. Never pay money to fill out the FAFSA. And this is the form that's filled out by students who are US citizens or US permanent residents, okay? If the student is not a US citizen, say the student or permanent resident, say the student is an undocumented student living in the state of Illinois, has lived with his family in Illinois, has gone to school for 3 years in the state of Illinois, K through 12, has a high school diploma or GED from the state of Illinois, they can qualify for the state grant if they filled out what's called the Alternative Application for Illinois Financial Aid, okay? But don't do both. You cannot do the FAFSA and the alternative application. It's one or the other. If the student qualifies for the FAFSA, fill out the FAFSA, okay? But if they don't qualify for the FAFSA, then you do the alternative application. We also want you to remind students that sometimes colleges may have their separate forms. So just ask the colleges. So when your student's ready to apply for college, make sure that you ask them, hey, are there any other forms I need to fill out to make sure I get considered for all your money from the college, or from, or is there special scholarships, there's special grants? Find out from the colleges themselves, okay? Now, when do you do this? Okay, you do this after October 1st of the student's senior year. Okay, so we may have some parents here that have students who are seniors right now. So hopefully you've done the FAFSA form already or the alternative app. If you have not, please do it as soon as possible, okay? Because the state money will run out, okay? Now, if they're not a senior in high school, you don't do anything right now. All you do is just get good grades in school and continue with your studies and so forth. But you can start looking for scholarships if, say, you're juniors, you're in 11th grade right now. But the financial aid application, you do it as soon as you can after October 1st. And that's for high school seniors and students who are already in college. And you do this every year. You're required to do this every year just because the situation can change from one year to the next. Maybe there's more people in the household that the family has to support. Maybe the income drops or goes up. Maybe the family has more than one student in college. All those things affect how much money the student could potentially get from the different sources that we mentioned earlier, but you fill out the form as soon as you can after October 1st. I tell families, get it done before Thanksgiving, okay? Because once Thanksgiving comes around, you get busy with Thanksgiving, then comes Christmas, then comes New Year's, and before you know it, you're in the middle of January, all right? Get it done before Thanksgiving, okay? In your senior year, that's also when you're applying for college, do the FAFSA form at the same time. And you go to fafsa.gov or you go to isic.org/alternative app if you're filling out the alternative application. And this will determine for what you're eligible to receive, okay? Now, so what do you need to fill this out? All right. For the FAFSA, okay, if you're doing the FAFSA, the student needs a social security number. And this is the mistake that I see all the time. Students guess their social security number or they switch numbers around. don't do that. Double check it, triple check it, make sure that the student's social security number is entered correctly. If the parents do not have a social security number, but the student was born in the United States, the parents just enter all zeros, okay? Enter all zeros. Do not use your ITIN. ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number. It begins with the number 9. That is not used on the FAFSA. If the student is a U.S. permanent resident, they will enter the Illinois registration code number, and then they use what's called a federal student aid FSA ID to sign the form. The student uses one, and the parent, if they have a social security number, will use it to sign the form. If the parent doesn't have a social security number, they just print out the parent signature page, sign it by hand, and mail it to the Department of Education. Now, for both forms, for the FAFSA and for the alternative app, you're going to need your records of income. So basically your tax returns, all right? And you use prior. So for example, students are currently seniors in high school right now. They fill out the FAFSA for the 21-22 year because that's when they will be in college, all right? And they're going to ask for the 21-22 year, they're going to ask for the income from 2019, all right? If your student is going to be a senior next year, they start filling out the FAFSA October 1st of 2021, and they're going to fill out for the 22-23 year, and they're going to use the 2020 tax information, all right? So it's really important that as parents, that you do your taxes correctly. That's another mistake that I see quite often, that parents don't do their taxes right. They may, sometimes every once in a while, I see parents who are married and each of them files head of household. That's incorrect. You can't do that, all right? If you're not married, don't file married filing jointly. Sometimes people do that. Get your taxes done properly and get them done. If you don't, as a parent, if you don't have a social security number, get an ITIN, individual taxpayer identification number, so you can file with taxes, because the colleges will want to verify that that's the actual income. So they'll look at the income, and they'll look at the assets of the family and also of the student. And then also you need to put the colleges that will receive this information. Everything you put in the FAFSA is confidential. It's not shared with anybody except the colleges the student lists. The student doesn't have to apply to them to list them. You can list up to 10. So just list them. This college won't do anything with that FAFSA information, alternative application information, until the student is actually admitted. All right. So we need that information. And then we also need the information from the parents. And we're going to use the information from the parents unless the student is 24 years of age or older, or the student is married, or is a veteran, or is pursuing a graduate program. Very, very specific situations when parent information is not required. Otherwise, it's going to be required, and it's going to be the biological, adoptive, or step parents. If the parents are separated, okay, then it's the information of the parent with whom the student has lived the longest in the last 12 months. That's currently the case. It may change down the road, but that's currently the case right now. No one else should be putting parental information on the FAFSA. Grandparents, godparents, older siblings, no, none of them. Only the parents and the student. If someone is in legal guardianship, okay, the student will be considered independent. They're not, the legal guardians are not considered parents for the purpose of the FAFSA themselves, okay? Now, another mistake that I see is that sometimes people report information that they should not report, okay? So if someone, fill out the FAFSA, you put your income information and your assets and your investments, but do not report the value of the home in which you live. So your primary residence, you do not report that. The value of a retirement plan, like an IRA or 401k or a pension plan at work, you do not report the value of that plan. If you're a business owner, if you're a family business and you have 100 or fewer full-time employees, you do not report the value of that family-owned business. Okay, so you exclude those, all right? Everything else you report, all right? If you have a 529 plan, and we don't have enough time to go into much detail about 529 plans, but it's a specific type of college savings plan that grows tax-free, so you don't pay taxes on it. And if you invest in one from the Illinois Treasurer's Office, which is called Bright Start Right Directions, it lowers the amount of taxable income they consider every year you do your taxes. So talk to the Bright Star people, the Treasurer's Office, to see if that's something that would be of interest to you. If you have very small children, I strongly encourage you to look into that. I have one for my son because college is going to be expensive, so we're trying to plan as early as we can. Yeah, there was a question in the chat real quickly. If you do not have a social security number, do not report the I-10, enter all zeros, okay? So you do all this to get what's called, currently the term is called expected family contribution. And I think in a couple of years, they may change the terminology, but what they do, this is a number that the colleges look at when they're trying to figure out, okay, what is the ability of the family to pay for college? If we cost this much and they can afford this much, how do we bridge that gap? And that EFC helps determine what that gap is. Now, before that, sometimes the college will say, hey, we need some additional documents to verify certain items, like this is actually what you made from working, okay? Or this is actually how many people you have in the household. Don't worry, it's perfectly normal. A mistake that I see quite a bit is that people ignore those emails or ignore those letters and they don't get in financial aid. If you do not complete the verification process, financial aid will not be dispersed or given to the students. You have to complete it, and they usually have deadlines. So keep track of all those deadlines. If they ask you for documents and you mail them in, don't mail your only copy. Make sure you keep a copy at home, all right? Just to make sure that everything's in order. And they do all this because they're trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for the whole cost of attendance? Now, the cost of attendance, take it with a grain of salt, okay? Some things are fixed, other things are not fixed. And what do I mean by that? Well, like tuition and fees. How much tuition costs university? That's it. That's how much it costs. There's no debate. That's that, right? Room and board? Well, that depends. Are you living at home with mom and dad and commuting to college? Or are you living on campus? If you live on campus in a residence hall, are you living by yourself, which is more expensive than having a roommate? Or do you maybe have, a total of 3 roommates? That's even cheaper than 2 roommates, okay? What about the meal plans? And you may say, wait, what do you mean? I gotta eat, right? Well, if you go away to college, are you always going to get up for breakfast? Are you always going to eat lunch and dinner in the residence hall? Are you never coming home on the weekends? If you start with the most basic meal plan and you say, I need more meal credits, you can always get to a more expensive plan. The college will always let you spend more money. But if you start with the most expensive plan and you want to go down to a cheaper plan, the college is going to say, nah, you signed a contract. We can't do that. So I always tell families, start with the most basic plan. But now you see how that room and board could be higher or lower depending on what choices you make. Transportation. How do you get to class? Do you if you live locally and say you live in Chicago, you take the CTA to class, or do you drive? Driving is much more expensive. If you go away to college, how are you coming home? Are you coming on a mega bus, or did you go way out of state? And you have to fly in. Those are very different expenses. What's the frequency with which you come home? I tell students, don't come home every weekend if you go away to college, because that's expensive. And the other thing too, students that come home every weekend, they don't do as well academically, okay? Books and supplies, some colleges don't even use books. It's all online, okay? If you do have to buy books, buy the used ones, all right? They're cheaper than the new ones, all right? I joke around with families and I tell them, get the used book from the kid that got an A in the class. All the stuff is already highlighted for you, right? And then the miscellaneous living expenses, this would be like going out with the friends, buying your toiletries like shampoo, deodorant, things like that. So that's why the cost of attendance, take it with a grain of salt, because it's not always fixed. It could go up and down depending on the family. So I mentioned that to families because sometimes they think, okay, we have to pay exactly this much. Now, be mindful of how it can vary. And so what the colleges do is they take the cost of attendance that we just talked in a lot of detail. They subtract what the family thinks, what they think the family can contribute to the child's education, which is the EFC, to determine what is the financial need, okay? And that's what the colleges try to do. They try to figure out how are we going to package the students so they can afford to go to our institution. So in this example, we have colleges A, B, and C, right? You may say, well, college A is 10,000, college B is 20,000, college C is 35,000. Well, college A is probably going to be cheaper for me. Well, let's hold that thought for just a second. Okay. You notice in this example, A, B, and C, the expected family contribution is 3,000, so it stays the same. So college A, this financial need is 7,000. College B, 17,000. College C, 32,000. But what if college C has a really huge endowment? They have lots of institutional money, all right? And what if they really, really like the student? They like the essays, they love the fact they're top-notch academically, they like the students going to a major where they need more students, they say, you know what, we're gonna give you the presidential scholarship of $35,000. college seat just became free. Okay, now that's an extreme, but the point being is, how did that college meet that financial need? Did they give you gift money like grants or scholarships? Did they offer you work study? Did they offer you loans? What kind of loans did they offer you? You know, we had the student loans, and then there's parent plus loans. With the parent plus loans, those are loans that the parent has to take out to pay for their child. And with the parent plus loans, I tell the families, hey, that's just for the first year. What about the next year? You know, when you still have the same financial need, you know, how do you have other children that may be coming and going to college, because you may have to take up plus loans for them? Okay. Are you older, maybe perhaps getting closer to retirement? You know, if you have a lot of plus loans, you may have to wait longer to work, or because you got to pay off these loans before you can retire. All right. All those things come into play when you're looking at this financial need. Did they meet it? How did they meet it? Was it, like I said, free money, or was it loans that you have to take out? You know, this is where you get together as a family, kind of get an idea as to, what can I afford? You know, what makes sense? Where is it a good fit for us? Where is it a good fit academically because you like the program? Where's it a good fit socially because you're gonna be happy? And where's it a good fit financially because the financial need was met? The other thing too with scholarships, I tell the students, if the college offers you a scholarship as part of the financial need offer or award or packet, ask, is this a one-time scholarship or is it renewable? Is it renewable, which means I'll get it every year? Do I have to maintain a certain GPA? Do I have to stay a certain major? What do I have to do to keep it? And what happens if I don't do that? Do I lose it? All of these things are decisions that the family makes when they're trying to figure out how to pay for college, how to navigate this route. So when they show up on campus, they don't have to worry about the money because they already thought about it. They already had these conversations. And this is kind of, this is a little bit of a summary of how it works. You fill out the form, the FAFSA, the alternative application. The college reviews the information, and so do you, because they send you a summary to the family, to students and the family. And then it's selective verification to complete the process. Then we receive that financial aid offer that I mentioned earlier, that award letter, to determine, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And then you let the colleges know. Let them know if you are going to attend or if you're not going to attend, if you're going to go somewhere else, okay? And then you complete the following process, which would be like meeting with an academic advisor, doing placement testing, um, filling out a residence hall contract if you're going to live on campus. You do all those things over the summer or after you say you're going to the college to make sure everything's in order when you show up on campus. And then you fill out the form every single year. Now, we have some parents here, I imagine, whose children are not seniors right now. And they're saying, okay, what can I do now? How could I get an idea as to what I can expect to pay for college? There's something called the Big Future EFC Calculator. College Board, which is the organization that does the SAT, they have this EFC calculator, right? You can enter your information, your income, your savings, your assets, and things like that to get like a preliminary EFC. This is a number that says, okay, this is what we think you're able to pay for college. All right. So do that. If you do that now, again, you're not surprised down the road, because sometimes people say, no, Abel, this is too much. I can't afford this much money. I'd rather you be surprised now than, in the senior year. Okay. So you have that piece, right? Each college has on their website what's called a net price calculator. It's required of all students, required of all colleges that receive federal aid. So a student can go on that website, on the college's website, Google Net Price Calculator, or through their search engine, and then you enter your EFC or answer other questions, and then it tells you what you can expect to get from the college as an estimate, and what you would have to pay out of pocket. Some of these, and then the thing with those net price calculators, just make sure it's up to date. Sometimes they may have information from a year or two ago, but it gives you an idea how some colleges are, could be very affordable. Some of the most expensive colleges, as I mentioned earlier, are some of the most generous colleges. I'll use the extreme. You look at the Ivy League schools, your Harvard, your Yales, your Princetons, those type of colleges, lots and lots of money. They're super expensive. We're talking, $60,000, $70,000 in tuition alone. But if you get admitted to them and you have financial need, you're pretty much going to get all free money. okay, because they have a huge endowment and they admit so few individuals. So each college is a little bit different. And then with all families, I tell them start saving early, because the earlier you start saving, the more that money will grow. And the less that you, as a parent, you may have to borrow, as I say, through Parent Plus loans. Or there are more colleges now become financially viable because you started saving early. And as for parents, I also tell them, hey, when you tell your son or daughter at a very young age, this is your college fund, we're saving money for college, it sends a very strong message that I expect you to graduate from high school and I expect you to go to college. All right. So you start developing that mindset of I'm going to go to college. All right. And with all families, I tell them, talk to your student, have these conversations, about what you as a parent expect of your student and what they can expect of you, how much you're willing to pay, how much you're able to pay, and how much you're willing to borrow. All right. Sometimes parents, you love your kids. I love my child. You want to do anything possible for them, but it's got to be doable, because if you get in a situation where there's still a little gap between what you can afford and what it costs, and the student goes to that college and they owe money for a semester or for that first year, and they haven't finished paying off the bills, they won't let them enroll for the following term. They're going to be financially encumbered, and then they're going to be stuck. It's not a good situation, right? So if you ever have questions, ask us your question. All right, we have a texting initiative. This is statewide. We're a state agency, so this is why we have all these different area codes. The student, or as a parent, if you wish, you text your name. Then we say, okay, what grade level are you a parent? And they respond, and that's it. And then you can text us any question you have, and we'll respond to you via text. It's a real person that does this. And then we'll also send you a reminder every October 1st when the FAFSA and the alternative application become available, so you don't forget. And the other thing too is if the state money is about to run out, we'll let you know. We'll say, hey, we're going to suspend the state grant on Friday. So if you haven't finished your FAFSA alternative app, get it done right away. Okay. And we also have, as a state agency, a group of individuals called ISAC core members. Okay. And these are recent college graduates that have gone through the process, who can serve as near peer mentors to your students. All you have to do is go to studentportal.isac.org/ISAC core, enter your zip code, and it tells you who your core members are. This is an example of two of my staff, Unica and Elizabeth, who work in the College of DuPage area. And they go to the schools, they meet with students. Now, due to the pandemic, everything's virtual right now, but once, we get back in full gear, we're revisiting. And we can help you with the process. We can help you fill out the FAFSA. We can help you fill out the alternative application. And more importantly, we can get your questions answered, okay? Because not asking a question is often one of the biggest mistakes people make. And if you ask those questions, you can successfully navigate this process. It's a little bit complex, but that's why we're here, okay? All right, I wanted to leave enough time for questions because I saw the chat kind of blowing up a little bit. All right, so there's a few in Spanish. I'm bilingual, so I'll read them in Spanish. Let's see here. Let's see here. There's a statement about how community colleges are a great option, that it's easily cheaper or easier to transfer to university. Yes, community colleges are fantastic options for individuals, but it all depends on the individual. In my family, my sister went to community college. I went straight to a four-year school, and then she transferred to a four-year institution. Now she's a teacher. It worked out well for her. She wanted to stay closer home. I wanted to get away from home. All right. Each person's a little bit different, but don't think that the four-year schools are too expensive, because they often will give you quite a bit of financial aid depending on the situation. Okay, someone says the student, my daughter graduates this year, but she is a junior. Okay, so she's graduating a year early. Okay, so if you're going to graduate a year, whenever you're going to graduate, you fill out the FAFSA for the year that you will be in college. So the FAFSA for the 21-22 academic year became available October 1st of 2020. On October 1st of 2021, the FAFSA for the 22-23 year school year is going to become available. So you fill it out. And when you fill out the FAFSA, you remember, you put the colleges to which you're going to send the information, and they hold it until you are admitted. Once you're admitted, then the college pulls that information to create like a package or a financial aid offer that then they either mail to the student or put it in the student portal so the student can download it, and they can see how much they're expected to pay out of college. Okay. So it all depends on the institution. Sometimes the colleges, if you get admitted early, I've seen award letters or financial aid offers go out as early as December, but most usually come around March or April. And colleges will give you pretty much until May 1st to make a decision as to where you're going to attend. And that's why I also told families, make sure you apply to multiple colleges, because when you apply to multiple colleges, you have multiple offers of admission, and you kind of compare and contrast, because you want to have those options, because what may sound good early in your senior year may sound a little bit different near the end of your senior year. Okay. Let's see. I'm not familiar with the term no load college. I'm not exactly sure what that was in reference to. There's a no loan, maybe it's a typo. No loan, where some colleges say we're going to package you without any loans. That means that they're going to meet your financial need based with all grants and all scholarships. Okay, so that's awesome. If you get into a college that has a no loan policy, usually those are very highly selected institutions with lots of money. And then your award letter will basically be just all grants and scholarships. Now they may ask you, say this is your piece that you have to pay out of pocket. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily mean free. It's just saying they're not gonna package any loans in your award letter. Now, if you don't get any loans offered and you still feel that you want to get some loans, the student can still qualify for those direct loans. All right. Let's see here. Okay. There's a question that it says it's difficult for parents that don't have social security numbers to have I-10s to get loans. How do we help our students? How do we pay for college? With a Parent Plus loan, the parent does have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident to qualify for a Parent Plus loan, because that's a federal loan. Sometimes you may need a co-signer for that, but if you as a parent have to take out too many loans, I say please proceed with caution. You may have to rethink, and this is why I tell families apply to at least 6 colleges. Okay, or students apply to 6 colleges so you can compare and contrast the different offers that you may get, because some colleges may be more doable than others. And the other thing too, if we go back to the cost of attendance, and let me just go back to this slide. You notice in the cost of attendance, you have to figure out, okay, what exactly do we absolutely have to pay right off the bat? The direct cost. So if the student's commuting, if you're living at home, your main cost is going to be that tuition and fees. That's it. All right. Room and board, they're living with mom and dad. Transportation, well, you can kind of figure out, okay, is it walkable? Do I have to cycle? Can I get dropped off? Can I take public transportation? Books and supplies. With the books, you get them from the library. Oftentimes you can find the book that they use in the library, so it doesn't cost you anything. All right. Oftentimes you can even ask the professors if they have an extra copy that they can lend you. And so you can mitigate a lot of these costs. So as a parent, there's ways by which you can be a little bit more frugal, but saving early is probably the most important thing. And people say, it's kind of hard. I don't have any extra money laying around, especially during the pandemic. I hear you. But if we can even pull it $10 away, $10 a month, that's $120 a year. All right. And then you say you did that for 20 years, that's $1,200, or 10 years, that's $1,200 without even accruing any interest whatsoever. You do compound interest, it really pays off. If you do something like a 529 plan, it even grows at a higher rate because it's very similar to having like a mutual fund. Okay. All right. So if someone wants to, if you have a question you want to ask and you want to mute yourself, you're welcome to do so. I have like 5 minutes or 6 minutes left. Otherwise, please drop it in the chat. Okay. With scholarships, the other thing is, as you're thinking about perhaps formulating the question, with scholarships, never pay money to do a scholarship search. Okay, never. They should always be free. Okay. When you go to our student portal at isec.org, we also have, this is just a snapshot. On the top, there's a toolbox, and you can resources where you can actually do a scholarship search that we partner with an organization called CapEx, and you can do it for free. So never pay money for scholarship searches, and never pay money for someone who says, hey, I can get you more money, I can get you to this university. Proceed with caution, because that can become very expensive. Okay. If you have a question, you can unmute. Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for all the information. It's been super helpful, and there's lots of information that I had not previously been aware of, but also a lot that just helped me to clarify that what we're doing for our EL students is correct. I did have a question on if a parent, most of our immigrant students that come in, they have, they're considered permanent residents because of the way that they're codified when they actually come in. So that's already, we can make sure that they're in the system, but they don't sometimes yet have a social security number necessarily, depending on which group that I have. So I've had students that are undocumented and their parent doesn't have a social security number, and I want to make sure that they have some access to funds for education. What do I do? Do I have them put in 000 for their parent's social security number, or because I've run into some issues with that with students, you know what I mean?
Yes, they do. So there's a couple of things, and I want to touch on these, reiterate one point that I made earlier, and then I'll get to your question. So in the FAFSA itself, it's centered on the student eligibility. It's all about the student. So as you mentioned, students are U.S. permanent resident, or if say the student was born here, they qualify for federal, they qualify for all types of aid, including the federal aid. All right. If the parents don't have a social security number, or they're undocumented, whatever the status may be, if they don't have a social security number, they just enter all zeros. They're going to get an error message. You just click check errors, like maybe a couple times to let you go through. That's just the FAFSA saying, are you sure you meant to enter all zeros? That's all the FAFSA is doing. Okay. And then it'll let you go through. And so the student can get their financial aid. So that's one. That's kind of like a blended family. The student's documented or a citizen, but the parents are not. That's one example.
That is the difference. That small tip right there is the difference between a student going and not going. So I've got a couple phone calls to make. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing too is sometimes parents, they fill out their tax return, and that's fantastic. And they use an ITIN, which is an individual taxpayer identification number. It begins with the number 9, and they inadvertently enter that on the FAFSA. Don't do that, okay? Because it'll cause an error. So you got to enter all zeros. So don't use your ITIN on the FAFSA. Okay. So now the other scenario that you mentioned about undocumented students, the RISE Act passed in, I got 3 minutes left. The RISE Act passed in 2019. I'm thinking my years right. 2019, and it went into effect January 1st of 2020. And that said that an individual who's undocumented, who's graduated from Illinois high school, has got an Illinois GED, went to school K through 12 for at least 3 years, and during 3 years lived with the parent, and as soon as they are eligible to do so, to apply for permanent residency, they promise to do so. So it's like an affidavit saying, I promise to apply for permanent residency once I'm eligible to do so. They do that, they qualify for the state grants through the alternative application for Illinois financial aid. Some people call it the RISE Act application. That's not that. We call it the alternative application for financial aid. So that's for the undocumented students, and also transgender students who have transitioned to female and who did not register for selected service. They're technically ineligible for federal aid. They can also qualify for the alternative application.
Okay. So real quick, first of all, thank you for that clarity. I was going to ask what they passed in, ISAC passed in June 1st of 2020. This is awesome news. That undocumented students who either are getting a GED or graduating, they have to sort of sign a promissory note that says they're going to apply for permanent residency. Is that it?
It's an affidavit which is embedded in the alternative application. Okay.
In the alternative. Okay. In alternative.
It's embedded in there already, because they use the verbiage from a law that passed back, I think it's 2001, that said that people who meet certain criteria will qualify for in-state tuition at the public universities in Illinois. And those criteria was that you graduate from Illinois high school, 3 years in high school, lived with the parents, and then promised to apply for U.S. residency as soon as you are eligible to do so. That's all. It's an affidavit, a promise. That's it. And that's embedded within the alternative application, that affidavit. So it's a click box. They say, I promise. That's it.
So the alternative application would be real suitable for those who who are either undocumented or for whatever reasons have have experienced barriers, like with parents, who have, I don't know. It's difficult to, it's kind of a touchy area. Sorry.
That's okay. You've actually touched upon a third point. If someone's a say U.S. citizen born here, and they have a crazy family dynamic, okay, and there's issues with parental abuse or whatnot, they're considered special consideration, and they need to work with the college directly, or they can work with one of my core members, and we can help them talk to the college to explain their special circumstances. I'm not sure if that was what you were referring, but there's some situations where the students are not able to get information for the parents for a very specific reason.
Well, we have students who can't get they know they were born in the US, but they weren't born in a hospital. And it's true. So it's just one of those things that does sometimes happen, and it's hard to,
that's
you know what I mean?
That's outside my expertise about birth certificates.
I know. I know, but as you know, it gets that technical and detailed and deep with some of those issues. So thanks.
Well, I like to think, I don't want to keep you. I want to make sure we stay on track. It's 11:46. So thank you so much for your participation today, and hopefully you learned something. And if we could ever be of service, please contact us at ISAC. We're here to help. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.